You're not making this stop no more? Yeah, it's too dangerous, man.
This is nasty.
This is.
Nasty.
I mean, man, half your passengers are drug addicts. Total insanity.
America, Seattle just elected the most unqualified mayor in modern history, and the results are already catastrophic. Katie Wilson is a 41-year-old woman who never had a real job, lived in her parents' basement up until recently, has never owned a car, rides a bicycle everywhere, and her community organizer husband also doesn't work. But here's what's absolutely insane. This woman, who is barely qualified for an entry-level position, is now in charge of Seattle and a $9 billion budget, while homeless encampments are literally setting up camp across the street from the Space Needle. She plans to hire based on DEI quotas, open government-owned grocery stores, and turn Seattle into a socialist experiment while the city burns around her.
So this is why we're talking about progressive taxes, because we don't want to keep layering taxes on the working folks who are already paying too much. That's why I'm proud to have led in designing and passing the Jumpstart payroll expense tax, which is our city's landmark tax on wealthy corporations.
What is up, guys? Tyson De La Cruz here. Thank you so much for rocking with me. This case perfectly shows what happens when liberals vote based on ideology rather than qualifications. You get a basement-dwelling activist running a major American city into the ground. Let me start with the disaster that Katie Wilson is inheriting and making it even worse. The homeless situation in Seattle has become so bad that encampments are now setting up directly across the street from the Space Needle, Seattle's most iconic landmark and biggest tourist attraction.
I saw the photos on social media first. Tents pitched across from the Museum of Pop Culture, Mopop, the Space Needle rising behind them.
Think about the optics here. Tourists from around the world come see Seattle's most famous landmark, and they're greeted by drug addict homeless people living in tents on a private property. This is what decades of liberal policies have created. Wilson thinks the solution is to stop clearing homeless encampments entirely.
While I was there, a father walked by with his toddler. When he spotted the encampment, he picked up his child in one smooth motion and crossed to the other side of Fifth Avenue. Kept on walking.
The image of a father scooping up his toddler and crossing the street to avoid a homeless encampment perfectly captures what Seattle has become. A city where families can't safely walk near their famous tourist attraction. Meanwhile, tourists are taking selfies, trying to Photoshop and crop out the tents from their photos. Now let's talk about the woman Seattle voters chose to fix this crisis. She is so qualified, guys. She's so qualified that she makes the word qualified unqualified. Katie Wilson is a 41-year-old who's never had a real job in her entire adult life. She lived in her parents' basement up until recently, never has owned a car, rides a bike everywhere, and has a community organizer husband who doesn't work either. Wilson promised to end encampment removals, calling them cosmetic fixes to move people around and not actually solving the problem. So her solution to homeless camps at the Space Needle is to just let them stay there permanently. This is the kind of level of thinking you get from somebody who's never actually managed anything more complex than a plastic bag. This woman is not qualified to run a convenience store, let alone a city with a $9 billion budget. She's barely qualified to start at an entry-level position at most companies, but Seattle liberal voters decided she would be in charge of one of America's major cities. What are liberals voting for when they chose somebody with zero management experience, zero business experience, zero real-world accomplishments? Wilson's plan for Seattle reads like a socialist fever's wet dream written by somebody who's never worked in the real world. She plans to hire based on DEI quotas, prioritizing Native Americans, LGBTQ+ activists, and other identity groups over qualifications. She also wants to open government-owned grocery stores. Does that sound familiar? Because apparently the free market isn't woke enough for Seattle.
The city budget includes nearly $3 million for expanded treatment next year. The capacity exists. The legal tools exist. What seems to be missing is the will to use them.
The reporter noted that treatment options exist, detox beds are available, and the city budget includes nearly $3 million for expanded treatment for homeless individuals. But what seems to be missing is the actual willingness to use them. Wilson's solution is to eliminate even the minimal enforcement that currently exists, ensuring, I guarantee, that the crisis will even get worse. This is what happens when you elect somebody who's never managed a budget, never ran a business, never hired employees, and never dealt with real-world consequences. She thinks the government can solve homelessness by opening grocery stores and hiring based on skin color rather than competence. To understand how bad Wilson will be, you need to understand how bad the previous mayor was. Bruce Harrell had 4 years to address Seattle's problems and completely failed on every single level.
The criminal system has had a disparate impact on Black and brown communities. Let me lead with that. So when this person is committing 6 or 7 crimes, I don't know his or her story. Maybe they were abused as a child. Maybe they're hungry. So my remedy is to find their life story to see how we could help first. I have no desire to put them in jail.
Harrell's administration was a complete disaster that allowed the homelessness crisis to explode, crime to skyrocket, and the city's reputation to collapse. Microsoft just moved its Build 2026 conference to Las Vegas because of safety concerns about Seattle's convention center. The World Cup is heading to Seattle this summer, and every tourist is going to see homeless camps near the Space Needle. But here's the thing, at least Harrell had some government experience and basic management principles. Wilson makes Harrell look like a seasoned executive by comparison. She's taken over a city in crisis with 0 qualifications and plans to make everything even worse. Wilson's incompetence isn't just about homelessness. It extends to every part and every aspect of city governance, including the complete collapse of Seattle's education system under woke ideology.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Brennan Ham, and I'm the Health Education Specialist and Trainer for Seattle Public Schools. I prefer my name to pronouns, but anything said with respect is great, so they, she, and he all work for me. I'm very excited to be here with you today because we are going to read a fabulous book called Introducing Teddy.
This, my friends, is what Seattle Public Schools is teaching kindergarten. Gender ideology, transgender concepts, and radical social theories to 5-year-olds. Wilson supports this kind of indoctrination and wants to expand it throughout the city's institutions. Parents should be closely monitoring curriculum in nearby districts because Seattle's model is spreading across the country. When you have unqualified activists like Wilson in charge of major cities, this is what happens to public education. It becomes a vehicle for ideology indoctrination rather than learning. Wilson's plan to open up government-owned grocery stores shows how completely disconnected she is from economic reality. She thinks the solution to Seattle's problem is more government control, more bureaucracy, more socialist policies. The reporter described hearing sounds inside the tent, people moving around with jerky, unpredictable motions that come with heavy drug use. Fentanyl killed more than 1,000 King County residents in 2023, and Wilson's solution is to eliminate the minimal enforcement that might encourage people to seek treatment. This is what happens when you elect somebody who's never dealt with real-world consequences. Wilson thinks she can solve complex urban problems with good intentions and socialist policies, but she's never had to manage anything, so she doesn't know any different. The most telling image from this Space Needle encampment story is the tourists trying to crop out the homeless tents in their photos. They came to Seattle to see Seattle's iconic landmark, but they'll remember both versions, the postcard image that they're sending to their friends and the reality that won't fit the frame. This perfectly captures what Wilson's policies will create, a city where their official image doesn't match the reality on the ground. Tourists will continue coming to Seattle, but they'll leave with memories of homeless camps, drug use, and urban decay rather than a beautiful Pacific Northwest city that Seattle used to be. Microsoft moving its conference to Las Vegas because of safety concerns shows how Wilson's policies will destroy Seattle's economy even more. When major corporations won't even hold events in your city because of crime and homelessness, you've lost the economic foundation that pays for city services. America, Katie Wilson's election as Seattle's mayor represents represents everything wrong with modern liberal politics. When voters choose ideology over qualifications, when they elect someone based on progressive credentials rather than management experience, you get disasters of what's happening in Seattle and what will continue to happen in Seattle right now. A 41-year-old woman who lived in her parents' basement up until recently, never owned a car, never had a real job, and whose husband doesn't work either, is now in charge of a $9 billion budget in one of America's major cities. She's not qualified to manage the on switch at the local smoothie shop, let alone address complex urban problems like homelessness, crime, and economic development. Wilson's plan to end encampment sweeps while homeless camps spread to the Space Needle shows how completely disconnected she is from reality. Her DEI hiring quotas, the government-owned grocery stores, reveal someone who thinks socialist policies can solve problems created by decades of failed liberal governance. The Space Needle encampment perfectly symbolizes Seattle's collapse. Tourists cropping out the reality of urban decay from their vacation photos, while a basement-dwelling activist promises to make everything worse through ideological purity rather than practical solutions. Seattle's public schools indoctrinating kindergartners with gender ideology while the city burns around them shows how completely the progressive movement has lost touch with basic priorities. When five-year-olds are learning about transgender concepts while homeless people die from fentanyl overdoses outside their schools, you have completely lost the plot. This is what happens when liberals vote for feelings over qualification. They choose activists over administrators when they prioritize ideology over competence. Seattle is about to become a real-world experiment of what happens when the most unqualified person possible gets put in charge of a major American city. Let me know what you think about this. Drop it down in the comment section down below. Smash the like button if you kindly would. Share, subscribe, and as always, guys, I'll catch you on the next one.